Okay, this is the school board workshop of August 25th. Welcome. And let's see, the order of business is, first we'll discuss protocols, and the expected outcome of the protocols discussion is a final draft that is understood and accepted by each of the board members. Then we're going to have a conversation about the superintendent evaluation rubric, and the outcome of that will be to decide whether or not to upgrade or change the superintendent evaluation instrument. Then there is a board, an example of a board self-evaluation that's been distributed, and we'd like to have a brief conversation about the desire of this board to proceed with a self-evaluation. Then Ms. Chandler will do an annual report, or we'll do an update on our annual report, and then we will conclude with, I think, some really interesting work in assessment, instruction, and research. So to start, I'm going to actually turn to Mrs. Dozier, since she is the one who has led the charge on the protocol for teaching and learning, for protocols.
I apologize, I wasn't quite on,
I know, yeah, please bear with us because we're scrambling between meetings to get something done.
Can't hear.
and it's taking a long time to sign.
They're having a hard time hearing.
You guys can't hear? Oh.
That's right
I
now
think
while
we
we're not
agreed
doing-
we would only leave one side screen on, and that would cut the sound.
Okay.
Okay, I don't see our agendas on here. Here we go, I think I've got it now. Meetings.
But I don't think your draft is in there.
You don't think so?
No.
Is the draft attached to the agenda?
I know she said
No.
that she made each one of us a
She
hard
did.
copy.
She did.
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
which I've got to find mine. Let's see. It's thick. Okay, well, I had a whole bunch of stuff sitting on my desk. There it is. Okay. As all of you will look through, I have to commend Ms. Bensing because I gave her this literally at the last minute. I started working on it Thursday night. Ms. Morgan called me, I guess, and I didn't realize this was going to be on the agenda today, so I apologize if I missed something. But as you all know, we have all worked together on these protocols, and there were several protocols. I sent out a memo after the last workshop that we had, and I kind of went over the protocols that we had not decided on. We also, y'all gave me some input for some additional ones that we would put in here. There's still a few that I will send you another memo tomorrow letting you know those that I think that we need to work on to finalize this. But if you look at your table of contents, you can see that there have been some additions and changes, and there are strikes throughs so that you can see what the new numbers are. And if you go to the document itself and the first change, all those first pages are all the same changes, but if you look over to page 2, that has been changed to say agendas and meetings of the school board, regular meetings, briefing meetings, special meetings, student hearings, workshops, and retreats. There's been an addition of the agendas, describing our agendas, the consent agenda, and I think I basically wrote language that basically describes how we do current pulls. And I think that all of this will come in handy when it's time for those new board members that come on board. When you start talking to them, this will give them kind of a clear-cut idea of what exactly that pull means. Then you go to the briefing workshop and briefing and workshop meetings. Then you go on down to quorum. All of this that's underlined is new language. Public notification, all of this is the way that we currently do business, and I tried to put language in there. If any of you see any corrections, any additions, or anything like that. We also added here underneath regular meetings, we added board members will strive to make no new proposals the night of the regular meeting, which that is something that we, that has been added. Now, anytime that any of you want to jump in and say anything, don't hesitate. Then you have the reorganization meeting, which basically talks about what happens the night of the reorganization meeting, because that was not part of our language. Then you go to the pre-organization meeting, which, I might should have put workshop here, pre-organization workshop.
Okay.
I thought about that after today. That might be better than saying.
Yes.
So we'll go back and we'll change that. I just, after you look at something so many times, you kind of think that, and I had Linda and Susan both look over it. Yes, sir.
I do have a few suggestions, questions on this portion. if I
Okay,
may.
all right.
The first one is on Roman numeral 3, under agendas. The second sentence indicates individual board members may place items on the agenda by advising the superintendent their desire to do so. That's not part of the school board's present practice for individual members to place items on the agenda. So that would be a change in the present process. If that's something the board wants to do, I think maybe it should be addressed in policy before
Okay,
it's in
all right,
protocol.
okay. Let me explain what I meant there.
Okay.
And that may not be clear. Like, for instance, and this is for, like, you've got all the agendas here, like when we, I'd like for us to talk about so-and-so, will you put that on an agenda for us to talk about?
Okay. It's bringing up the request for the item to be on the agenda at a board meeting to be at a future meeting.
Right.
Okay.
So do we need to clarify that in
It
this?
probably would be helpful, just
Okay,
to,
why don't you come up with some language real quick?
I don't know about real quick, but I'll be happy to work on that.
Start now.
Well, okay, because that was what the intention was, and
Understand.
thank you for catching that. What else do you have?
I do have some others, but
Okay, let's hear
I'd be a
it.
little bit hesitant. But,
Go ahead, we
the
want to hear them
next-
all.
The next sentence indicates superintendent shall establish reasonable procedures and deadlines for the receipt and request to place items on the agenda and request to make a presentation. That last phrase, in the public discussion period. I'm not sure what that means.
Okay, I'm not sure that's the way I typed it either. That is supposed to say the superintendent shall establish reasonable procedures and deadlines for, that's supposed to be for the receipt, for, in other words, getting and request to items, that should be 4 items placed on the agenda, period. And then persons making request, thank you, making request to make a presentation in the public discussion period is approved by the superintendent.
But
That's that little section where we
that's
have,
about public comment,
right,
public,
Right.
members of the public rather than
when they
board
want
members.
like 10 minutes instead of,
Okay,
Okay.
you know what I'm talking about? When-
Okay.
yes, ma'am. I do.
Okay.
So that's for.
All right, so that's what, so, and I don't remember it being typed like this, I'm sure it was, I think, okay. So is
I'd be happy to
approved
work with
by,
Linda for language
okay,
on that-
by
that
the
portion, too.
superintendent, okay. All right,
So then that's not referring to board members?
no,
Okay.
that's not
So should it
referring
be
to
in the
us.
same paragraph as board members requesting items on the agenda?
Well, maybe not.
Yeah, it's on separate.
Well, it's
the board's
something that's going on the agenda,
It does get
Right.
placed on the agenda when that
Right.
request is made, that's true.
so, like if a new board member comes on board and they say, well, what does this mean right here? Oh, persons of the public can ask for, an allotted time, so that's why that goes under agendas.
Okay.
Could be just a separate sentence.
Yeah, we can just
Some-
drop that down
drop
as a
it down.
separate sentence.
On the next page, the last sentence,
The next page.
last
Okay,
sentence of that first paragraph.
okay. Are you talking about under consent agenda?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay,
It says a single member's request shall be, cause it to be brought forward by the superintendent in the form of a recommendation, after which time the board will act on the pulled item using Robert's rules. That should be capitalized.
okay,
for-
Robert's Rules of Order.
I would suggest for action on the item.
Or action,
Oh,
okay, action on the item. Thank you.
And the
Okay.
recommendation.
On the recommendation, okay. Well, that's using recommendation twice in a sentence, and you're not supposed to use the same word twice in the sentence.
Recommendation, after which time the board will act on the poll items.
How about on the recommended
Voting.
item?
Well, it could be the recommended item.
R-E-C-O-M-M-E-N-D-E-D, recommended item,
Okay.
okay? Now, what else do you have?
Under
You can
public,
just
no-
say, well, or you can just say proper English would probably be, at the time, the board will act on it using Robert's Rules of Orders.
Period, and then leave everything else
Yep,
out?
yep.
Does that, okay. All right, then we just strike all that, okay, all right. What's your next thing, Mr. Martin?
under public notification, the second sentence starts out as provided by Florida statutes. I would take out that first phrase, as provided by Florida statutes, and just start with any regular or special meeting may be held at any other appropriate public place within the district by giving prior public notice as required by Florida statute.
okay,
Okay, so you want that at the end?
yeah.
Yes,
Okay,
and because the notice requirements are different for a regular and a special meeting, I wouldn't try to put them both in there.
And didn't we change that for a special call meeting to not be 48 hours, but we said 2 business days? Or didn't we change that policy?
Well, it's all according to statute.
Yeah.
Is what Mr. Martin was saying. If you don't put in the time frame, if you just say as provided by Florida statute, the
Gotcha.
Florida statute
I
tells
understand it. Thank you.
you.
okay,
Next one I had was on the reorganization meeting, the next page.
okay,
The second paragraph,
all right,
the first sentence, in November of each year, I would add the words, "the board will conduct,"
okay.
and take out the D.
Board will, wait a minute,
Oh, yeah, and organizational.
will conduct,
an organizational meeting,
all right,
and then I would take out the phrase "of each year."
Yeah.
why would you take out in November, why would you take out of each year?
Because you have that at the beginning. It says in November of each year at the beginning.
Okay, okay, I
Yes,
see,
ma'am.
I see. So take it out there and not at the beginning?
Yes,
Right.
All right,
And state statute, not statute.
yes,
okay.
statute.
I'm so glad you're here, Mr. Martin.
Yes, ma'am.
Why weren't you with me when I was typing all this up?
Should have been.
You should have. Okay, go ahead.
The last one I had in this area is on page 5 at the top, the first paragraph, the last
Wait a
sentence.
minute, we went ahead and changed reorganization meeting to, it's going to be reorganization workshop, okay?
Pre-organization.
Didn't I say that? Pre-reorganization workshop, yeah. Okay, now, which one?
The top of page 5, that last paragraph, the very last sentence, there's a word missing or words need to come out, I'm not sure which,
See,
but
the
that,
agenda will include, for
Does it say-
discussion, items for
Or just
placement on further,
that sentence.
Future.
on future regular briefing,
and workshop meetings,
and
that's fine.
workshop meetings.
But then that last sentence, something's missing.
Comma. That end should be out of there. Dates
For these
with,
board agendas.
for these board agendas. Oh, this doesn't make sense at all.
Let me see, I've got all my notes right here
Dates.
somewhere. Well, let's see.
Dates can be provided at any time?
How about just backwards? Board may provide input, no, updates for these board agendas.
Subject to board input at any time.
Okay.
Updates may,
Updates are subject to board
updates.
input.
right. Are
Updates
subject to
for these board
input.
agendas are subject, okay, are subject
Updates for these agendas are subject to board input.
board input.
So you're taking out the "and" before the regular and briefing, you're just inserting a comma.
Yeah.
Right, right. So it will read, updates for these board agendas are subject to board input.
But then we're using board twice in the same sentence. We can just say update for these agendas, referring to the ones you just talked about, are subject to board input.
Are subject to. Okay, updates for these agendas are subject to board
Input.
input at any time. Okay, thank you. All right, and I know Miss Benzing is over there fast and furious. I'm gonna have, maybe the two of us will catch the updates. Okay? All right, executive sessions. I'm gonna look down at you every time, Mr. Martin. Emergency meetings. Board members, anything on either of those? Okay, then if you will go over to, let's see,
Page 15, leave request starting.
okay, page 15 down at the bottom. And where you see like travel allowance on that page, that, once it gets ready for typesetting, we'll move that over to where we won't have any lags on previous pages. Okay, does anybody have anything about budgets? I had Susan work on that using the language that I had in there with the chair. I had the board office manager, along with the chair, reviews expenditures, blah, blah, blah. And then she said that that really doesn't happen, so we took that out. It used to happen.
Should it happen?
It's really up to us,
Okay,
whether or
so-
not we want it to happen or not. That was something, I know, when I was chair, that was something that the chair did. The chair went over the board budget with, with the, it was at that time, it was the secretary to the chair.
Actually, when I think about it, it makes sense, because I periodically get questions from office staff about whether or not this is a legitimate expense, and then I refer them to somebody else. So
Okay.
it probably makes sense for that to be
Okay, the board
a
office
regular
manager
practice.
reviews
Yeah.
along with
Quarterly.
the chair. I don't think we have to say when, I mean, unless y'all want to. I don't remember ever doing it unless there was an expenditure that came up or right before it was time to make the budget. That was the only time I ever did it.
Okay. Okay.
So, I mean, but we can put it in there quarterly if y'all want to.
I think just as needed. I wouldn't put
Okay.
anything in there.
It works.
All right, for the coming year, I'll add as needed there, or as needed, okay? All right, anything else? All right, what about allowances? Is that what everybody remembers that we agreed on? In county, is that what everybody agreed on?
Board members, one thing we didn't talk about, I don't know if we've had this discussion, we currently have 5 committees, and then we have EDAC, that's really not a committee, but it could be number 6. But with new 7 board members, we really need a 7th, and we talked about the student advisory being the liaison, but that's kind of something we all want to do. Do we want to consider having another committee formed and have ideas, everybody kind of think of ideas, what it could be? Ms. Dozier?
That is one of the things that will be in the memo tomorrow. That's one of the things that, the new alignment of new schools. There's several things
Okay.
that we've never discussed, and that's on the memo for us to
I will
have
defer,
topics.
I will defer to you. Okay,
In
good.
fact, I'm trying to keep up with everything we have and haven't discussed that needs to be in here, and we have not discussed that. You're absolutely right. And we need to discuss that because, you know, part of the rationale and reasoning for this is we need to be well-organized, know what we're doing as we are expanding this board, so we can show them basically what, you know, what the protocols are in our office. Okay. All right, so. All right, then we move down to purchasing cards. Y'all may not even be aware, but we do have purchasing cards that are in our office, and I don't think any of us ever use a P card. Occasionally, I think in the past, somebody has used a P card, but that's kind of the language that I just put together for the usage of that. Conference registration, that's the way we do it now. Dues and fees to organization, that's the way we do it now. Repairs, maintenance for all of the equipment, that's the way we do it now. All right, again, this board office periodicals, that will be moved down. Now, let me explain why this was put in here. This was put in here because I went back through a lot of the old reorganization books, and we used to have periodicals that came to our office. And right now, we have basically we don't have any of them come to the office. And this was put in here simply because in the future, you know, there is, you know, a periodical, it's something about boardsmanship, you know, the administration of boardsmanship or something like that. It's a national periodical. We used to get
Florida
that.
Education.
Yeah,
several
and we
of them.
used to get it for every board member got their, you probably remember, every board member got their own copy, and you know where it usually went, file 13. And so I don't know how it was decided, but we kind of stopped getting all of those things because they weren't being read. And when we were doing a lot of budget reductions, that was one of the ways that we really reduced, because at one time, we had one board member, and this was years ago, that had a lot of periodicals coming into the office. And, you know, that's why that is added there, because in the future, you know, it may be that somebody might want something like that to educate themselves,
And
yes.
if you recall, we switched to one, and we had the little
Yes.
staple thing where everybody would initial, so if you
Right.
read it, you would then put it
Right.
on somebody else's desk and
Right.
just circulate it,
Right,
so.
exactly.
Well, and the other thing is that now a lot of those periodicals are right online, so we
Right.
can access them at any
Well, I don't know
time.
that you can access them if you don't have a subscription.
Okay.
What happens is that, I know that for some organizations I'm a part of, it's easy for me to share the access. We would have a joint piece that we could share that would be, for example,
Subscription.
International Literacy Association. If we were to join a regular membership and say we wanted to get one e-membership, then we would create our username and our password that everybody in the board would be able to access the periodicals that way.
Right, I do understand what you're saying. However, these companies have become very savvy that they can actually realize that it's coming from a different computer than the one computer. All of these magazine companies have become very savvy in realizing to where, you know, they don't want to buy one subscription online and then everybody be able to use that one subscription.
Let's just table this and move
Okay,
on to the
okay,
others.
thank
We'll
you.
come back to
I
what we
agree.
need.
All right, meetings scheduled by board members. This is the way we do it now, according to what my thought process is. Okay, alignment to board member committees, assignment to board member committees, and this is, as I said, you know, it doesn't talk about, you will notice it doesn't talk about all of the committees that we have, but that's one of the things that when I was writing this, I thought, we've got to talk about that because we have 5 advisory committees, and with 7 board members, we need to move to having something to where every board member can be a part of, so. Yes.
I'm just looking quickly to see if there's anything about what the role of the advisory committee is. Now, it's in the policy, right, Mr. Martin? And does it say both, that it is to deliver information and to receive information? Does
Now,
it say it's
that's-
to give direction to an advisory about what the board has particular interest in at any point in time?
Now, that is in policy with the purpose of.
That's what I'm asking him, if it's,
That's in policy, what the purpose of the board committees are for. This, however, tells what the purpose of the
the
board.
assignment is. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that it's all covered, and I forgot to look it up.
And the board policy addressing advisory committees does establish a purpose for each committee.
Yes, but does it say what, we've had conversations about whether or not, for example, in the reorganization meeting, we should be talking about whether we want to give a directive to finance advisory to talk about a particular topic, or we want to give a directive to curriculum to talk about a particular topic and come back to the board. And I don't know if
There is language, but I believe it provides for the superintendent to give that
Superintendent, right.
authority. It provides that prior to the beginning of each academic quarter, the superintendent shall establish and inform the school board of a quarterly input subject for the advisory committees.
Okay, then we'll let that go. Thank you, I'm sorry to
That's
make that
okay,
segue.
that's okay, because the next paragraph, basically, it is what, when the
Reporting.
board committees, when these 5 board committees were actually established, this was from language, what the expectation for board members sitting on those committees as liaison was. So I put that here as a description of what our role should be at sitting on those committees.
And you do actually have 6 at this point.
Well, yeah, we have,
EDAC.
EDAC is
EDAC
now.
has become part of that
Right, so
policy. Yes, ma'am.
we need really one more that's functioning year-round, so. Okay. Now we move down to expectations of board members, and Mrs. Morgan, you will begin to see everything that you put. I kind of plugged it in
Yep.
wherever I could put it in, so that's one, that, and then down here under, when you start at 25.
Right.
And you look at all of those, and you go all the way down to 34,
Thank you.
okay? I thank you for the input, because this was, this is our document, so anything we want. And then, of course, I don't believe there are any more until page 21, where it talks about expectations of superintendent, and I believe that was your language as well.
Yes. So I'm curious about the reaction of the other board members, because I'm not sure that I've made that clear before.
Well,
And it may be too specific.
So,
too
changes.
specific?
I think so, because it changes.
Well, I think I knew where she was coming from, because, and
take
I'm
out
getting ready to
the-
put words in your mouth. You mean put words in your mouth, what my thought was? What I thought was, I know Mrs. Morgan has been asking regularly for us to have updates on student programs that we have, how those programs are
Progress.
doing, the progress. It's like progress monitoring of what we are actually using, what's in place out there in the schools. And that's what I saw. And then where it says, and the effectiveness of the district investment. In other words, we've got programs out there that we have never we've never monitored it to see if, in fact, we're getting the best bang for the buck. Is it really causing student achievement to improve, or are the students that are using that program staying flatlined? And if that be the case, then guess what? We need to look at that program and maybe say, we're spending money where we shouldn't be spending money. I think that was what you were talking about. Is that?
That's exactly what I was saying. And then in addition to that, the reason I specified third grade math and Algebra 1 is because third grade math is supposed to be the predictor for student success, and algebra is supposed to be the indicator for kids essentially completing high school. So those, I thought, were two things that we as a board ought to be focusing on. That's what research shows. But again, if it's too specific for everybody, I'm not going to.
My only suggestion, well, a grammatical thing, algebra needs to be capitalized because it's
Capitalized.
followed by a number. And we may want to write out what a DA school is, but those things are subject to change by the state at some point. So they're very specific to where we are now.
And hopefully, this document will be something that will be subject to change as well.
Right.
It will be
Case then.
something that will change yearly. Sometimes it may change, sometimes it may not, but if there is something that needs to be changed, like that, the
Just want to
DAs.
remember that it's there and if things
Right,
change, yeah.
Right. And so you think we need to, that's differentiated accountability?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. Does that take care of everything?
I think so, for that part.
Okay. We move on over to expectations of the board office staff. These were added.
Me.
Does anyone have any comments about that? And I will tell you that probably there are already some of these generic letters that already exist. And I know that I said I would pull some out. I know if we have access to Donna's computer, do we still have access to Donna Lazansky's computer? Do you know? Pardon me? Because there are all sorts of sample letters from the time that we set up sample thank you letters and such on her computer or on the P drive or wherever it can be found. Okay, and I will say that I put all of those together. All right, now we move to 24, and this is something that was added as a result of a contribution from Ms. Fisher. I don't know that you wanted it all added, but I put it all in there.
Okay.
Is that what your expectation was, or did you expect me to wordsmith it? Because I just put it all in there, and of course, all the other board members need to, kind of talk. There is already an expectation under, I believe, what the board members will do.
Right.
Where is that?
Right,
Under-
this was supposed to be an appendix.
Oh, so
was
this is
more-
supposed to be in the appendix?
right.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Because we already had,
Yeah, we do have
yes,
something.
right.
We have something, I think it's under all board members. If you go back to where it says all board members.
It's going to be for the appendix.
Okay, all
That was
right,
the
very good.
last-
We will just
that was the
add
last
that.
thing I-
We'll add that to the next thing in the appendix, okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, that being said, we'll have,
That entire 23,
what?
talking about the entire conflict management.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the
Well, it
appendix.
starts at page
because-
24 and goes all the way to,
Right.
that's what, she wants that as the appendix to basically describe
It
number
explains it.
23, I guess. Give us a little nudge. Or is it number 24?
But it's
20.
23, and then but it becomes Appendix F.
Okay,
Right.
Okay?
all right. All right, then I will get a memo out to y'all tomorrow. We will need probably maybe 30 minutes to finish up, and then we can have this printed, and it will become something that will be what we live by.
And again, thank you very much for
You're very
being
welcome.
fleet of finger on this one.
You're very welcome.
Not only it meets our requirements for the accreditation, but it also prepares us well, I think, for 16 when we add to the
a big
board. It's
task.
been a lot of work, yeah.
Big task.
Yeah. It was a huge task. And Mrs. Dozier did it all
It
with
was my
Ms.
pleasure.
Benson.
It was my pleasure to do it for the board.
The next item on the agenda is superintendent evaluation rubric. This is something Mr. Toiber has brought up repeatedly, and I think several board members have also talked about it at the table as As I understand it, do we want to expand the rubric to make it more meaningful? And so, Mr. Toiber, I'm going to let you sort of carry the ball on this.
Well, thank you, and I really haven't worked on it yet. I just wanted to have the, kind of the opinion of the board, but if we're moving, being driven by the strategic plan, and that's where we're basing our budget on the strategic plan, should we better align the evaluation of the superintendent based upon the outcomes of the strategic plan? And so that's kind of where I was.
Okay, so we have the performance appraisal instrument, which
Right.
is the rubric that everybody's been talking about, I think.
Well-
And then we have the 5 goals. Now so are you talking about,
I'm saying the rubric should be geared to the 7 areas of the strategic plan.
got it?
So, wait, okay, a rubric is how you score something.
Right.
All right, so you're talking about, for instance, in leadership, are you talking about changing the actual instrument that we use to evaluate the superintendent? Is that what you're saying?
In other words, if you take a look at now the terms, if we, like one, for example, might be, I think one's in human resources or one's in vision or whatever, we take those topics and we align them to the strategic plan, to the 7 areas of the strategic plan.
I see what you're saying. And then, I know that's what you're talking about, but I think Mrs. LaRiviere has been talking about developing a rubric that would describe, like, this is what you have to get this score, this is what you have to get this score, this is what you have to get this score. I think so it's 2 different things that we're talking about.
That way.
And I do really think that we need to make sure that we correlate it with a strategic plan. That's the most logical way to go. And then if we were to adapt what we have is we have a score, but we really don't have a rubric because it doesn't say, a rubric tells you what that score means. And all we have is, a word, outstanding, but that doesn't tell us what outstanding is supposed to be. And it will be different in each of those areas. So when we create our rubrics with our students in alignment with that, it would make sense to have a rubric that explains. And I would also, and I think Mr. Toiber had thought this was a good idea too, to move to a 4-point rubric rather than keeping it at a 3. And because then it allows for a place for an unsatisfactory and needs improvement, satisfactory and outstanding. There needs to be a better positioning of that. And then working to identify if this is what a unsatisfactory would be like, what a satisfactory, what it needs improvement, so that we're all looking at it the same way, and that we all come to a consensus and an agreement on, okay, yeah, I can agree that this is the way we should be looking at things.
Well, I would have a question on that. And my question, and I know when you said that, that you wanted us to have a rubric. My question is, do we have rubrics for our teachers' evaluations? Do we have rubrics for our administrators' evaluations?
I know we have it for the teachers'
Dr. Gray,
evaluations.
I think we do. Isn't that what, yeah.
Yeah, so if they're going to get highly effective, it says these are the things you need to look for in each of those categories.
They're very, very detailed.
Okay, however, there is a discrepancy between what the teacher feels, there's a list of things. It's not really a rubric, but instead, it's a list of things. In other words, in order to get highly effective, you have to have blah, 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 blah. And I know that's one of the things that I hear teachers talk about all the time, that it is so subjective because they'll say, well, I think I met this piece of criteria, and yet
I'm sorry, there are descriptors and pretty specific descriptors, and only 50% of their evaluation is based on the manager's evaluation, and then the rest is on, the other half is student performance. But there are descriptors within that descriptor. It might appear there to be a list, but they're very specific. There are fine lines between effective, highly effective, needs improvement, and if you read the descriptors, there's much more detail.
And the
We can
part
get
of
you a
that-
copy of it if you
yeah.
want.
And part of that is if the administrator is going to score them as needs improvement or unsatisfactory, they need to provide the documentation as to where they're getting that from. So it provides, you work together to find common language, and we may constantly tweak that rubric along the way, every year. They did that for several years to get to where they are now. But we do have to have, we have to know if we're looking for a 4 under the area of human resources, what is that 4 going to have? And there are some pieces there that have to be there and are non-negotiables. And I believe, I know that it has changed from years ago when we first started trying to have the descriptors, when we used to have all 12 areas, that the descriptors and the way that has been developed has changed a bit, so it's more fair. And if a teacher disagrees, it's up to them to make sure they bring the documentation and provide that they have it.
So let's just see, first of all, if there's consensus on the simple part, which is going to a 4-part as opposed to a 3-part numeric for the rating. Are people comfortable with moving to a 4-point scale, as opposed to a 3-point scale, as long as it's been defined? Is there consensus on that? Okay. Then the question becomes, what do we want to do about defining creating the rubric within each descriptor, within each category?
Well, if I may, just 2 things. The policy 1.061 describes what our policy is on the evaluation of the superintendent. And then it says that they'll be evaluated in essential categories of performance, and that the instrument which is hereby incorporated into this policy shall be used. So the current instrument, when I looked at it, has a lot of the components that would be strategic plan focus areas
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
And, and then there is a rubric of sorts, because then it goes on, for instance, under leadership, to say develops and monitors a strategic plan, directs and facilitates priority setting and decision-making. So
Right, but it doesn't say what it has to be a 4. It doesn't say what it has to be a 3.
I gotcha, okay.
Turn
Okay,
over to the very
that's
front
it.
of the page. Turn over.
Yeah, yeah.
Right there,
Okay.
it talks about the scoring of 3, 2, 1.
Right, and
And
it's
it really doesn't.
below meets or
Yeah,
exceeds
and it doesn't really
expectations.
describe each one of those.
Exactly.
I don't have a problem with
I
this.
think it's a good idea.
I don't have a problem with the 3, as long, I do agree that it would be better to define each one, give a better description of what it is. You continue to use the 3, but define each area more clearly.
Okay. I guess we need to find out how many want to move to a 4.
Yeah.
Then.
So let's go back then to the 4 versus 3. Mrs. Dozier is comfortable with the 3.
Would you have a problem with 4? Do you understand?
Well, I don't have a problem with 4, but
Just because state statute calls out 4 for the educational, in the educational guidelines for teachers and so on, and so just to be
Right.
congruent.
And I guess, this was developed by using the quality initiatives, the quality principles, and right now, I can't think of why they came up with the 3, because this was also developed when you were here, and there was some rationale why they used the 3. I don't know if that's standard business or, because I do know that a lot of this, if you look at it, if you look at our evaluation, a lot of it is geared or based on business management. So I don't know if that's why the 3 was used.
I think, I know that one of the reasons why a 4 or an even number is the most preferred statistically, although we as a state don't do it, but statistically, it keeps you from there being a natural regression to the mean of easy moving to a 2. It actually makes you make a decision and truly evaluate it. There also needs to be a part 2 where there's a point where somebody may be just blatantly unsatisfactory in something, but I don't know that on some areas a person's blatantly unsatisfactory, but there may be qualify under an area of needs improvement. This is an area of focus of need that needs to be worked on. And so therefore, that's why I lean more towards a 4-point than the 3-point.
And the only thing that I would say to that is, I think that's why we use the 0.25, because that gives you the leadway there to
Well, I just know that when we do our rubrics and for assessment pieces, with all of the training that I've been through, with all the teams that I've been part of, we never did that. You stick with a whole number. It's either a 3 or a 4. It's either a 2 or a 3. And you need to make that decision which area you believe it is.
So what you're saying is eliminate the percentage points, is what you're saying. And see, and as I said, I guess I saw that in a memo or saw that somewhere where somebody had written that out to all of us. And when I looked at the evaluations, I know I used percentage points. I think I saw, I didn't bring that with me. I think a couple of other people used percentage points. And if we hadn't have used percentage points, the overall collective score for the superintendent would have drastically gone down. So, and I understand what you're saying, but sometimes you say, okay, we're just going to have percentage points, and we're going to have them 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we're not going to use any, we're just going to have scoring of 1, 2, and 3, and 4. We're not going to have any percentage points. And I see why you're saying that, but at the same time, you might be forcing people to do something that, I didn't want to say unsatisfactory. Do you see what I'm saying? Instead, I wanted to put something else there because there was some movement maybe, or there was some work, but I didn't want it to be totally unsatisfactory.
Let me just bring in the other 2 board members here, Mr. Teuber and then Mrs. Fisher.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan. My problem with the point scale outside of the concrete numbers is then you're really creating a continuum. So why even have the points at all? Because you're really going 0 to 4 and every increment in between. You're really on a continuous scale. So I don't like the point system. I'm okay with a 3-point or a 4-point or a 5-point, but it has to be concrete. You have to know where we are otherwise, then you don't really need points. We just say from 0 to 5, and you put it somewhere on a continuum post.
Ms. Fisher?
Right, and I think, I agree with you, Mr. Teuber, and as it stands right now, it's either you're not doing it, you're doing it, or you're doing a better job than we even expect you to do. But it's not specific as to what does it take. I think we're all just kind of flying by the seat of our pants. And in fact, the first time I ever did an evaluation, we did not have reference to the protocols, and it was kind of like, well, I guess it's, Then when I saw other people's evaluations after the first time, I said, oh, well, you can use 2.5 or, okay. But what I think what Mrs. LaRiviere is getting to is that we need to have a scale, and it has to be specific and as to what's required to get a 1, 2, 3, or 4. And I think that's a better way to move, and it's more consistent with what we use nationally also.
I think if we had a true rubric that told us what a 1 would look like,
Right.
maybe we might not have chosen a 1. Maybe, or
Exactly.
if someone had a true rubric of what a 3 looked like, they might not have chosen a 3. So that's where you have to have that guideline, and everybody will have to come to a consensus of what they would look like and agree on the rubric.
So the teacher and the staff evaluations are all 4-point?
Yes. I'm looking at, but yes, there's
factors are?
Effective,
Needs improvement?
needs improvement, and is it, has
Unsatisfactory.
it gone to unsatisfactory? I don't know what word they use, but there's a fourth one.
Then that's where I would go. But let's, so, Mrs. Fisher?
Yes,
Four?
yeah,
4
4.
point. Mrs. Dozier?
I'll concede.
Okay, great, thank you. So now the question becomes, who's going to do the definition? Is there some way we can go back to Baldridge, Sterling, to see if they've updated this instrument since it was created, which was probably, what, 10 or 12 years ago? It may be that,
Try about 14 years
14
ago.
okay, well, it may be that without doing any work on our
Changed a
part,
lot.
you know, some of this has been done.
Well, and we're also going to need to see, we also need to take it and make sure we correlate what aspects of the strategic plan go in which area. So that
Yeah.
would need to be embedded in the instrument itself.
Well, that's something
So
that
then when
staff.
we have 7 focus
Right,
areas?
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something I think that staff who are working on the strategic plan would be best
Mm-hmm.
to do.
I don't know if we want to have, I'm willing to help work if the board would so desire, to help work with coming up with what those, so we have a skeleton to look at for what a 1 would be, a 2, and so on.
She's a new board member. She volunteered. Is anybody going to say no?
No, we say yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
Mr.
one-
Twyver.
One more suggestion.
Sure.
As with the teachers, 50% is from their supervisor, 50% is hard data.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we ought to consider the same type of formula, that 50% be the metrics. We set, certain metrics that would give certain scores based
Okay.
upon performance of the district.
Okay.
Are you talking about the goals? The
No, I'm not really
superintendent
talking about
goals?
goals. I'm talking about,
Where the
with a
dis-
teacher,
where
it's
the
teacher
district
performance.
is?
I'm talking about district performance, exactly right.
Within the strategic plan, where they've got the, where we have our metric measurements within the strategic plan, then yes, because you're right, some part of that may not be, if that instrument may not be totally correlated with a measurable metric we have, but a lot of them are. So kind of work it out that way.
Are you talking about district performance? Is that, that's what I hear you talking
He's talking
about.
about the dashboard, and he's
Right,
talking about
you're
the
talking
metrics
about, you're
buried in
talking
the
about,
strategic plan.
basically, teachers in the classroom are, 50% is based on their student achievement, then 50% will be based on the superintendent, 50% of their evaluation will be based on the overall performance of the district, student achievement, student,
Well, for each of the areas,
Performance.
each of the metrics that we have in the measurable metrics we have.
Goes
in
beyond just in the
strategic-
classroom, because she's also responsible for the operations and customer
Yes.
relations. So it goes beyond just the classroom performance, but the same concept. All the things under her auspice and control.
oh,
I'm going to just call on Mrs. Fisher for a second.
Okay, so then, and I don't think it is 50% anymore, anyway.
It's changed,
But
I
I would be reluctant to start to tie anything to any state scores of district performance right now, because we really don't have that. And I just wanted to remind everyone that when Dr. Graham first came on board, she had created an evaluation instrument that was more, I think, like what we're discussing now, so I was
pull
wondering if
that
we could
piece in
ask her
together.
for some thought or input on that at this point.
Well, I did create a document, and it gave a lot more data than the current document requires. And
rich.
what I would suggest, if you want Mrs. LaRiviere to work on the rubric, is that she sit with Dr. McCullers, because he helped me create that document. The second thing I'm curious about is the performance goals. I don't know where they fall into all of this, or if they're not evaluated, that's just a judgment at the end. And I'm also thinking about what my contract says, which is that I'll be evaluated on the performance goals. So I do think if you want to make a switch, there is value in aligning it similarly to what we're doing with teachers and administrators. And I'm being judged on the district's performance anyway, so it may as well be an official part of the document. Those are my thoughts right now, but I think Dr. McCullers could certainly be helpful in this situation. Because when you start talking about a rubric, he's who I thought of several weeks ago, that he has some expertise in that area and he can help create a document.
Okay. In the interest of time, I'm just going to point out the board self-evaluation instrument that got handed out. This came from FSBA. It's a compilation of board evaluations by universities, by school districts, by nonprofit boards, it's a self-evaluation instrument. I thought we'd talk about it today, but we've been productive in the other areas. So I think since we're going to have to come back to protocols, it might be appropriate if you would all just look at this instrument and get back to me if you have questions about it or you want me to do more on it so that the next time we bring it forward to discuss, we have something to refer to.
It would be great if you could, because our protocols say we will do this 60 days before the organizational meeting, so
we
that
gotta
would
get
be
something
great.
going. Yeah. Okay. And that brings us to Ms. Amity Chandler. She's running those screens. I can hear them
And
heating up.
This conversation was at the board's request. I don't know if it was February or March. You asked us to come back at the start of the school year to talk about the annual report before we begin putting it together. So Ms. Chandler has done some, I'm talking so they'll come up, Amity. Ms. Chandler's done some work on what other districts do and what other organizations do. And I think one of your main questions that you wanted to settle on was the format and design.
Good afternoon, board members. I promise you that we are shopping for new projectors. We're going to get quieter ones. It's a team effort. So I'm going to go back to what I remember Ms. Dozier saying a couple of weeks back in a workshop, and that is not to talk about best practices, but how you make the practices that you do better. And so I always get excited about conversations where we're able to take something that we have always done and talk about it a little bit and provide some input and get a fresh direction moving forward. So I'm just going to provide some information to board members, and then we'll follow your lead on what your preferences are for how the district represents itself in an annual report. So for-profit, nonprofit, or government agencies, the purpose of an annual report is standard across the board. It really is designed to celebrate an organization's success. If you're a for-profit organization, it's always the profit line as well. To reflect responsible spending, how did we use your dollars, public or investment, and to educate on the mission and vision of an organization. Those are the foundational roles of an annual report since the beginning of time. What is changing, of course, in the annual report is who consumes it and how it's consumed. So annual reports consider their audience, and sometimes organizations will create different types of annual reports for different types of audiences. Depending on your mission and vision, a one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter report sometimes is not necessarily the best way to go. But in essence, your audiences are always going to be your stakeholders, your funders, your future funders, particularly if you're looking to raise capital dollars, and then, of course, your legislative supporters. So what are the trends for annual reports? And they tend to be, again, the same, whether you're for-profit, profit, or government. Less paper, more online interaction. So people are used to finding their information on the web right now. They are not accustomed to going into libraries or going into a physical building or facility to pick up the annual report or information about the organization. So because of our shift in how we consume information, we see organizations moving towards more of an online interaction as opposed to the paper traditional report. An online interaction is also unique because it provides an opportunity for the publishing agency to track who's looking. How many hits did that report get? Which pages were the most popular? What was the information that people were looking at? What search engine did they use to get to your organization's annual report? And that type of data helps you inform more information and more decisions about your consumer and your audience. And those are analytics that we would use moving forward in any organization to better communicate to our audience. Less text. Remember, we are living in an online, quick consumption society now. And so we have fewer audiences willing to sort through pages of information and more audiences wanting bulleted information as quickly as they can consume it for the very purpose that they're wanting to get the information for. They're searching for a specific fact, a specific reason, a specific purpose, and they don't want to have to sort through all sorts of data to find it. And then the dual use of an annual report. Annual reports are labor intensive no matter what format you're going to use. It requires staff time, it requires graphic design, it requires an internet presence. And so anytime you put that kind of staff hours into a project, you want the project to have as many legs as possible, and you want it to be able to swim for as long as possible in whatever ocean you put it in. So dual use annual reports can be very handy for large organizations like ours. There are many models for annual reports that we could look at, but I wanted to put the Salvation Army model in front of you for a couple of reasons. Selfishly, it's my favorite charity, but above and beyond that, the Salvation Army actually generated quite a bit of online blogging and conversation from for-profit and non-for-profit companies about the brevity of how they moved their annual report to something a little fresher and more user-friendly for audiences. So when the Salvation Army realized that nobody was reading their printed copies of their annual reports, including their own staff, they moved to something a little more functional that everybody could take a look at, so it was something for everyone. I did provide the link here. We can visit it today if you'd like, or you can go back and reference it. But in short, the Salvation Army's annual report has a very broad presence on their website. You can navigate based on your topic, or you have the option of printing one page of the annual report, the page that you want on a PDF, or you can print the whole annual report if that is indeed what interests you as a consumer. So with that type of a juxtaposition of content, the online story as well as the printable version, they have a little bit of something for everyone without generating the overhead expense that an annual report would normally generate if they were printing 28,800 copies of that annual report. And so let's talk a little bit about audience. When we work on an annual report, any large report really, any publication for any organization, we have to consider our audience. What do they care about? What are they going to take the time to read because it's what they care about? And then what will they remember if they took the time to read it? Those are the types of impressions or footprints you hope to make on an audience with any type of content that you're going to generate as an organization. So looking across the state, I just wanted to provide you some district comparisons. I don't know that we need to walk in the shadows of other organizations. I believe that whatever the board chooses today needs to be unique to Lee County, but I just wanted to provide you some context of what's happening across the state. So on the left, you see districts, similar sized districts, that are not doing annual reports in the traditional sense. That does not mean that they don't publish some kind of a report annually. So for example, the report that Miami-Dade publishes annually is their budget book. And it's a very large book because they have an auditor that does it for them. And so that is considered their annual publication. Palm Beach, for example, used to do an annual report, but in talking to their previous communications director, who is no longer in that role, they struggled with what many of my colleagues across the state struggled with, and that is data from the Department of Education comes in at all different times of the year now. So it's difficult to say, do I wait for this data set, or if we want this data set, do we wait for it? And then it was becoming more and more difficult to show data trends because they kept changing the collection tools and the assessment tools, and it would be very difficult to explain that to any audience. And so they gravitated away from the traditional annual report. Polk County has an interesting format where the Education Foundation does the annual report, and they share that with the school district, and they claim it as a joint partnership report, and it is heavily based on successes and partnerships in the community and with the foundation. So that's always a
Welcome, Mr.
possibility
Bauer,
as
to our
well.
meeting today.
I see the dimple. I see the dimple over there. The smile. And then FSBA and FASA, which we're all familiar with, they don't publish a traditional annual report, but they publish documents annually that their stakeholders expect. most of it has to do with the legislative session, and those are the things that their consumers or their audience cares the most about and are expecting from that organization each and every year. So when we say no annual report, what I'm really saying is that districts are changing their habits and their processes based on, again, what is going to be best for their audience. Hillsborough County, which is the 8th largest district, I believe, in the country, produces a 6-page annual report, and it is also online as well. And then Orange County is very similar to Lee Counties. We're each producing a 16-page content report. So that's kind of the state of the union, so to speak, about what's going on across the state, in case you were curious. The evolution of the annual report in Lee County, I was able to do a little bit of digging with purchase orders and print orders. We used to use a calendar format, and you can see the quantities that were printed and the costs. I cannot account for the variation in costs because the history is before me. I apologize. But you can see that sometimes, depending on how you print what you print, the per unit cost can be very expensive, and it doesn't reach as many people. So the legs that the report has doesn't go very far. When we switched to the book format, it wasn't because a calendar was a bad idea. We switched to the book format because the district was heavily lacking in consistent, standard handouts and published documents. And so when we switched to the book format, I was able to make every page also count as a handout. And so every page that you see is also a PDF that can be used by board members or district leaderships for public speaking events, for committee meetings, for whatever it is that you're doing in the community. And so it met a dual need at that particular time. And you can see the cost variation there. And I can explain for that cost variation between 12 and 13, 13, 14. There was this pattern in the print shop that existed before me where the print shop would back bill the department for the graphic design. So even though the print shop belonged to communications, communications would still receive a bill for the graphic layout. Well, we put an end to that. So the real cost of the annual report for last year for 500 copies is the $535. And again, we do have those consumable PDFs, dual use, but again, it's in paper. It doesn't necessarily engage stakeholders at any other level. And if you don't physically have it in your hand, it's possible that you may never lay eyes on the project that was completed. So I do think that we can get better, and that's part of the discussion that we're going to have today. So that's just our level, our evolution here in Lee County. So some questions for the consideration for the board today. Do you believe that the district needs an official and traditional annual report? Who owns the report, and what voice do you use? Is it the board's report and the board is speaking to the public? Is it the superintendent's report and the superintendent is speaking to the public? Or is it the report of the district and the successes of the district stand on their own? I bring that to your attention because traditionally it is the clients that you serve that are the most prominent in an organization's annual report. I don't believe that we have accomplished that here in the district. I think that we can do better in portraying the clients that we serve. The best example that I'm seeing of that, of course, is the Salvation Army, and then, of course, the Education Foundation's annual report that I see being shared in Polk County with the school district. It really is all about the people we serve, they serve. And then what is the purpose? Are we communicating successes? Are we reporting on the strategic plan? That is something that I do see in for-profit and nonprofit trends, is that the annual report actually becomes an update of the strategic plan. But then, of course, you have to ask yourself, who cares? And are they going to read it? Who's the audience and how do you make them care? And then does the purpose justify the cost? I think we've gotten the cost down pretty low for print. Of course, if you go electronic, the cost becomes negligible and it's all about the design and the programming. Who is the audience and what is the format that's most likely to be consumed by the audiences that we're trying to reach? And then I had just provided some links for board members if they wanted to look at some of those annual reports prior to today's briefing. But those are kind of the questions that I put before you today, and I am going to turn it over to the board for discussion at this point.
Comments? Ms. Fisher?
Well, okay. I do like the book form. I think that the report is the district report and should tell successes and should give pertinent information to the public. For instance, in the calendar version in the 2010-11 on page 22, we had an overview of the budget with some graphing showing how much money our general budget is and where each portion went. In the book version in 1314, we did not have that piece. And several times when I had taken some of the reports to speak to different groups, that question came up because everybody wants to know about the money. So that would be one thing that I would request we include, something like that, a graphic about our budget, you know, what our budget is and where does it go, how many employees do we have, et cetera, okay? I liked the handout pieces in the 1314 one. I think since our calendar is now online and almost everybody uses the online version either through the website or the app, we can keep our costs down. That would definitely be my preference.
Mr. Toiber?
I'm biased. I mean, to me, whenever I get an annual report, it gets 15 minutes of my time. And then I don't even file it because you're never going to look at it again more than times than not. You throw it away. People just don't spend the time reading it. And they might peruse it and go, that's all nice. Very few people are going to look at it more than once. A calendar, on the other hand, every family, all the events of our school calendar, all of our special events that nobody can keep track of because of all our, the Yom Kippur and our holidays and so on. It's a very unique calendar, and nobody likes to have to go log on their computer or their smartphone to go find on our website to find out a date. They'll post it. They'll post it in their kitchen. Everybody does, and everybody uses that. When the bottom half's the calendar and the top half is some important information about the district, you just, when you're eating your cereal or you're doing, people just read that stuff, and they read it every month, and it's in front of their face, and pertinent school performance data. Every month it changes, and every month they look at it. My daughter made a wonderful gift for me last year for a calendar that every year, every month has a different family photos, and all the birthdays are on there with our photos. And it's just, I can't tell you how many times I look at it, it just brightens my day, because I look at it in one, whatever month, February is my one daughter's birthday, so it's all focused on her that month, and it just makes you look at it and you smile, but you're always, it's there. And so with the school calendar, it's the same thing. You look at it and it's there, and you read things and little nuances that, you may not read the quote at the bottom of that particular month the first time you switch to it, but sooner or later it catches your eye, and that's something you pick up that you wouldn't have picked up in a 15-minute perusal. It's something that there's a whole lot of information, both in the 1314 book, which I don't mean to discredit, and the calendars. There's way too much information for you to assimilate in a 15-minute review. And that's the reason why my propensity is, look, either my vote inclination is either don't do it. If we're not going to do it right, don't do it. Don't spend the money part way and just hope people read it, because they won't. So if it's just a matter of printing a book, then my vote's, I'm not for it. I say then don't spend the money. If we're going to do it as Ms. Chandler said, with the intent of we want it in their face all the time. And how do we do it? Put a little, add a neon blinking light on it, make it squawk when you walk by it. I don't care, but if we're going to do it, we need to do it right. And to me, the calendar is about the most cognizant way, because every parent wants that calendar, because there's just so much information that we have to offer that we just can't give on a monthly basis. So,
Ms. LaRiviere?
My question regarding the calendar component, and I understand what you're saying, Steve, because it's nice to have something that you can hang up there. So I see that. But here they only printed 750. And that didn't get out to everybody. That didn't get out. So that's my question.
I don't know, the years back, is that all we printed?
Yes, sir, that's all we printed. So you make some very good points, and if you'll just humor me for a moment to talk about some what ifs. There is a marketing premise that says you have to give your consumer something that they're going to use or look at. So a calendar has a utility. You're absolutely right. The orthodontists use our school calendar to schedule orthodontic appointments, pediatricians, and parents. So there is some utility about having a product that people use in front of them with our brand, with our district information, with things that they're going to end up reading over the bowl of cereal. It's a very good marketing strategy. Cost-wise, if you wanted everybody to have one, it's going to be difficult to get it to like $1 a piece. even if we just do the single calendar on the bottom with some information on top, we need to realistically expect $1 a piece per household. That seems like a big number, but this district does not, you spend very few dollars on actually marketing or providing information to parents in print format. It's not something that you do because, you want to be good stewards of your budget and you don't want it to look like fluff. So in reality, this is all that's ever been printed, so we could do better. The other option is that we could explore sponsors. I believe Ms. Dozier had mentioned that when the last time we talked about that, to help underwrite some of the costs of a calendar, understanding that I believe the previous calendars had a little too much information, small print, difficult to read. We could use 12 pages to highlight district successes with bullets, with pictures of the children that we serve. It could be a genuinely good document. We just have to be prepared to fund it or do some combination of sponsoring and funding.
In your professional opinion, as one of our marketing, gurus, do you think it's a good investment?
If we do it right, yes, sir, I do. And we can ensure that every house gets a calendar. It would be a good investment.
Mrs. Dozier?
Okay, I was going to give a history lesson, and I had written down sponsor advertising on here. I'm going to tell y'all how this calendar came about. We had an annual report that was basically, I think, 3 pages. It wasn't this big, and it was something that anytime we don't have any type of a big banquet such as what the foundation has, where they have it laying on the table, and I think that's their first rollout of their annual report for all the businesses to see. We don't have anything like that. So where would our rollout take place? Our rollout would take place to all of our parents, and we talked about when this was formulated, and I will have to tell you that this was my baby, and so when you got a baby, you kind of hold on to your baby and you like your baby, and the rationale here was that we would develop a calendar that eventually we would be able to give one to every household in the district, because this is something that provides, you talk about stealing shamelessly, you talk about being snapshots of success where you want to let everybody know the positive things that are going on in the district, and you talk about underutilizing or not utilizing your greatest resource out there, and that is all of your parents, because they don't know all of the successes that are going on. This is your document that is able to do that. It is able to tell the parents all the positive things that are going on in the district, not just at their own child's school, because if you look over here on page, let me see where it is. If you look over here on page 6 and 7, you notice that school accomplishments, every school was given the opportunity to send in something, some little snippet about what their schools did, something to where everybody that read this would know what their major, what their most important, what their greatest cheering accomplishment was for everybody, that read this or picked it up could see. And, we talked about getting bids from like the newspaper, because if you look back at the copies of this document that we use, they're pretty polished documents. I mean, you're talking about the glossy, full color, blah, blah, blah. We talked about maybe talking with the newspaper, because the newspaper, has a section where they can print, and they might be able to do it at a lower cost for us, which we might give up some of the quality, but we would be able to do enough copies that every single person, every single family in the district would have a copy of it. Now, look at that right there. Every time somebody picks that up, they see the board members. If I were a business and I really wanted to promote my company, then I'd really like to have that back page as an advertisement. And I would say, give this up to an advertisement, and then that would be part of your underwriting. And when you look in the calendar, these are just suggestions. When you look at the calendar, we have used the word of the month every single month, but we have months that we don't have words of the month, like during the summer months, for instance, and we've put other things in there. Those are places that could be scaled down, and you could sell an ad there. You know, you could put it out to people to see if people would be willing to do this, because this is the document as far as, and you know, we could partner with the foundation. I mean, I think that would be a wonderful partnership, to partner with that group, because we're in this together. I mean, they are our arm that does the extra things that we want done. And to me, this is very important to put this in the hands of every single parent. This is something that, you know, I know people that look for a good calendar, and this has evolved from, this has evolved from a calendar that used to have stuff all over it and pictures all over it to something that would readily be used for dentist appointment, ballet appointments, football banquets, and all of those type things. If I were a parent, I would love to have that in my kitchen so I could write all of those things at the same time. When I flip that over for the month and look into August, oh, advisory committees? Well, I might want to, maybe I'll be involved this year. Oh, finance, I'm interested in finance. You know, we talk about not being able to get people to get involved. Well, maybe our parents are the ones that, some of the people we want involved, and yet they don't have access to this because we do make so few of them. So just a little food for thought there. That's all.
Okay, other comments? Then I'll jump in. I'm not going to comment on the calendar because I don't have kids at home, and if it's a good idea, it's a good idea. The utility for me of what's happened over the last couple of years is using the individual PDFs and handouts. I've done several, well, half a dozen presentations where I've used those handouts. And you know, you go around and you leave, let's say there are 8 people at the table, you leave 6 on the table and you leave a couple of everything. And you go around and you pick up, because these things cost money, you pick up what's left when you're done, and there's never anything left. I may get back a tenth of what I put out, which means that people are finding meaningful the information that's on those PDFs. So, you know, very general information about the composition of the district demographics, student performance, I mean, it's just, they're great handouts. So I don't want to lose that. I think my thing that would add value would be if we had them on PowerPoints, and so when we go out as board members, we've all basically got the same message with the same PowerPoint. I'm not asking for additional work, but just organized in such a way that it flows. So anyway, those are my comments.
May I make a suggestion to the board just for consideration? Because what I'm hearing is, and you are right, the better practice is that it is effective when everybody gets one, but we do have the issue of cost. So just as an example, the Breeze networks, the Breeze papers, they have previously been contracted to print our code of conducts for our schools, black and white, newspaper material, and that's still in the $60,000 range. You know, lots of pages, nothing fancy, but it's still in the $60,000 range because we're printing more than we have for students, and we have to print in multiple languages. Would the board consider, Ms. Dozier, the calendar, I agree, is very important and has utility. Would the board consider a publication that is a calendar for parents to use that has some district highlights as a standard document that we do every year and parents expect, and we get it on a time frame where we can get it in their hands at the beginning of school? So we're at August now. We could print the calendar in January, but then that only covers half the school calendar, so you see some struggles there. But publish an annual calendar in August as the district's trademark publication for parents for back to school. We could even put some highlights of the code of conduct in there as well, and then utilize an annual report that's more utility, web-based, PDF handouts, turnkey PowerPoints that we could use for board members, and certainly we could partner with the foundation to incorporate some of the successes. So the board would have 2 annual documents that the public would come to expect every year, a calendar that would be published at the start of school years, and we can work on that content a little bit more as we progress, and then an annual report that we all agreed last year would be printed much earlier than we have traditionally printed, because we're not going to hold up the annual report for test scores. So your annual report this year really should be on your desks for approval about Halloween for publication before Thanksgiving. How do you feel? That's just a suggestion. I'm just wondering how you feel about that.
Weber?
That works for me.
Ms. Loverbier?
And I like that idea, but I think, like, when Ms. Dozier was speaking and she shared, it was great to have on there
Yes.
information about advisory committees, because that's something they can get involved with. A parent and family may not want everything else that we put into an
Right.
annual report.
Right.
But we put in the successes and the things that will encourage family involvement. That would be a very positive.
Main numbers, how to reach your board member, primary offices. I mean, again, we could work out that content, but it would be fresh in August as opposed to trying to print, in November, December, when half the school year is almost over.
I do know that many of our schools, in elementary in particular, besides what they do in their agendas, many schools still do a calendar for their school. And so sometimes there will be some families that will get 2 calendars, one from the school district and one from their school.
Right.
So there may be that overlap, but
Just suggestions. I'm flexible.
then I'm just letting
Yeah.
people know that, and then elementary schools know, okay, well then maybe we'll do something different.
Ms. Fisher?
Well, I think the calendar as a utility is a great idea. And I'm looking back at this one calendar, and it had things in it like FSBA Day in the legislature and FSBA Board of Directors meeting. The parents don't want to know about that. That's not even
Exactly.
an issue. And again, parents at different levels and at different schools want to know different things, and I think that the calendar coming from the individual schools they attend would be much more of a utility for them in their households, because that would be what they're looking for, you
Yes,
know?
ma'am. Well, there are some things that are relevant to all parents. How to contact your board members. The school dates
they can find
the school
us
dates
on the
themselves, the school calendar itself.
Student assignment.
Student assignment.
Yes.
Yes. School lunches. Those are the types of things. So consider it would almost be the paper version of our parent portal that we just designed online. And a utility of a calendar that could be in the hands of every parent. I believe that we could do it financially in a way with sponsors, and starting fresh, planning for next school year allows us to build those partnerships and get those sponsors
Right.
in place as we
It's true.
as we move forward. So.
Well, let me ask you this, how many, you count how many hits we get on our website?
We
and
do.
the parent portal?
Yeah.
And then, how about the app? How do you monitor?
Same thing.
Apps for the
So the website, we're able to track hits by page, by time spent on the page. On an average month, our website gets 400,000 hits. And then
So people are
naturally,
using,
oh yes, naturally these past 2 months, human resources is the most popular, as well as the new parent portal as well, and student assignment is very popular.
Right.
In our app, the most frequently tapped on icon is student grades, for obvious reasons. 144,000 over 90-day period, I believe, is the last period I checked. So
Yeah.
these are utilities that our parents have come to expect and they've come to use, and I believe that it's an important foundation for their engagement with their student and in our district. And so whatever you decide upon today, I would like to continue that momentum.
yeah, well, I mean, and I know I've seen parents, my own kids included, go on their phone to check their kids' grades and to find out what's going on at the school. So I think we're in a society where people are less geared to putting a pocket calendar in their back pocket and marking things down, like I still do, but they're more likely.
Right. Well, the interesting thing
to-
about our calendars online and in the app is that they sync with your personal calendar on your phone.
Yes.
And so if you add the event, it syncs to your personal calendar and you'll get the alert. But I think what I'm hearing and going back to is The only thing that this district prints one of, or we used to print one of, we don't even print one of everyone anymore, was the student code of conduct. And so if you are a large organization with stakeholders, that's not the best practice to engage your audience. You want to be able to put something in their hands that they're going to take home, that is a brand in their home that reflects the school district. And then, of course, continuing to build the online presence and the online engagement, because that's how you track engagement and cater to your audience. So there's a balance to be found there, and I don't think that we're there yet, but I think that we're getting a little closer today.
So then your suggestion was that if we do a calendar, that's one thing that everyone can have.
Yes, ma'am.
And it'll have some highlights and information that people might need. And the annual report will be something
Different.
smaller and more focused.
With dual
on the-
use, like Ms. Morgan said, it would continue to have the PDFs. We could make some standard PowerPoints and then have an online presence for it as well. If you go back to the Salvation Army page, it's a very simple online presence. But you have the option of getting to where you want to go as a consumer, as like Mr. Toiber said, thumbing through it for 15 minutes and putting it in the round file indefinitely.
Right. Thank you.
Mrs. Dozier, you're comfortable with the two-piece?
Fine with that.
Okay, it sounds like you've got a plan.
Okay, thank
Good,
you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Come on up. Next presentation is coming from folks in teaching and learning, and assessment, instruction, research is what we're going to share with you. It's an overview of our checkpoint process that we briefly discussed with you when we talked about the calendar. Excuse me. I just wanted to give you a tie to quality, because I know you look for that from time to time, and also alignment to the district's strategic plan. So we're trying to align our processes with the strategic plan, as you know, and we are also trying to align it with Baldrige and Sterling criteria. And what you're going to hear today about the district checkpoint process does both of those things. The district strategic plan, it's aligned to focus area 1, inspiring students to think and learn. And 2 objectives: 1, providing a standards-based curriculum that's differentiated to meet the needs, the learning needs of a variety of students, all students. And another objective: use formative and summative assessment data to provide stakeholders timely, ongoing feedback. And we've talked a lot about assessment. True assessment is ongoing. It's not a screenshot here and there in the form of a state exam. And then alignment to the Baldrige-Sterling criteria, it aligns in 3 areas. Category 2, which is strategic planning. Our academic goals are part of our district strategic plan. Category 4, measurement, analysis, and knowledge management. The district's checkpoint process is going to be used as a key process indicator, we call those KPIs, in determining the progress. So we're going to see progress, hopefully we're going to see progress all year long. And then category 6 is the operations focus, or the process management, the backward design that we've been working with staff on, teachers on since last year. It's a process used to plan instruction and assessment, and the district checkpoint process is a PDSA. It's a plan, do, study, act model, and it is intended to drive improvement. So the district strategic plan drives our work, and the alignment of the school and district processes to that plan, it's going to matter in everything that we're doing. And then I just wanted to share all that, so as you listen to this district checkpoint process and you think, okay, what does this have to do with anything? It clearly aligns itself to what's driving our work, and that is the district strategic plan. And underpinning all that, it is an example of quality processes that are at work in our district. So go ahead.
Now that you stole my thunder, you mean?
Sorry.
I have it all right here. I just want to know that I had it first. Board members, Dr. Graham and Mr. Martin, we are here to talk just a little bit about our implementation of the strategic plan in the teaching and learning department. So what you're going to hear today is focused on 2 goals. So goal number 1 being increasing student achievement, and goal number 4 being becoming a model continuous improvement organization. So what you're going to hear about is in focus area 1 is talking about inspiring students to think and learn. We're going to look at objective 1-2, which is providing a standards-based curriculum that's differentiated to meet the learning needs of all students. One of the strategies, as was mentioned earlier, is talking about implementing a backward design planning model, as well as providing differentiated support for schools so that we can get additional resources to those struggling schools. We've got to know who needs it, because at times We may know those DA schools right away, but we don't know that there's not an A school that's slipping, and we need to know what they need and how do we get those resources out there to them so that we can support them. Then we're also going to be looking at Focus Area 6, which is driving decisions with data. Objective 6.5 is talking about implementing systems for monitoring, analyzing, and improving performance across the district, because we want to make sure every learner in our district is in fact learning. And so how can we implement those systems so that we're monitoring for all students? And it's looking at strategy 1, which is supporting effective interpretation and analysis of information from everybody's data dashboard and or balanced scorecard. So it's kind of really looking at that whole picture. So that's kind of where we look at from the strategic plan. And then I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Robery.
Good afternoon, board members, Dr. Graham, Mr. Martin. Ms. Mackey and I are fortunate to work with an amazing group of talented educators in curriculum and staff development who work to support our teachers and our students every single day. And it's our privilege to introduce two of those members of our team. And Dr. Itzen will also introduce two of his members of his team who have prepared this presentation for you today. So from curriculum and staff development, I'd like to introduce to you Mrs. Lori Houchin, who is our secondary coordinator for English language arts and reading, and Mr. Lee Hughes, who is our coordinator for K-12 science, health, and physical education.
Good afternoon, and I'm proud to introduce you to the two coordinators in the Research and Assessment Department. This is Chrissy Stout, and this is Michelle Stanford. And I believe Lori Houchin is going to start us off. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to let us share this information with you. So when we talk about our district checkpoint process, we are using, as they said, the backward design. You may also hear this called Understanding by Design, or UBD, and we, as they've stated, we've worked 2 years in preschool trainings and so forth to get our teachers knowledgeable about this process. So this is a 3-stage process, and in stage 1, we're looking at what results do we want our students to achieve. So this aligns with PLC question number 1, is what do we want our students to know? So we plan with the end in mind, thinking about what is it we want them to master. And then in stage 2, we have to determine how will we know if they've mastered that, which is PLC question number 2. And then we move to stage 3, which is where we plan our learning experiences and our teaching and address all students. So we're looking at differentiation, and questions 3 and 4, what do we do when our students don't know that, and what do we do when they do, so that we're moving every student and meeting the needs where they are and moving them forward. So to break that down further in the district checkpoint process, when I say we, what we do every year and throughout the year is we ask principals to recommend teachers to sit on teams with us. And so these teachers, we give them some training and make sure that they're very knowledgeable about standards mastery and so forth. And the very first work that we have to do in stage 1 is look at the course description and look at the standards. And as Lee will show you later, there are a lot of standards for our students. And so what we have to do is to determine which standards would be most essential as foundational standards. In other words, which standards, if not met, would hinder further learning and progress in that course. And we look at those standards, and those are the standards that we want to keep an eye on and do an excellent job training our students and teachers. So then in stage 2, from there, once we know our standards, then we work as teams with the teachers and we develop this blueprint for checkpoints. And in the blueprints, we have to make decisions like how many times do we want to track this standard? So do we want to track it all the way through the year? At what levels do we want to track it? How many low-level questions? How many moderate-level questions? How many high-level questions? And so forth. And then in stage 3, with all of that in place, then we have to get to work and we make sure that we look at our academic plans, we look at the pacing, we look at where those standards should be taught, where we're going to dipstick for those standards to see that they're being mastered. And then from there, we ask our teachers to take a look at that with us and say, what other resources would help you in helping your students? So in the differentiation column, what kinds of things do you need, so forth and so on. And we put in the supportive resources in the academic plans. And now I'm going to turn it over to Lee, and he's going to go through a more detailed description of what each of those processes look like.
Thank you, Lori. So as Lori just described, the same process that teachers are using to plan for and then implement learning is also being used district-wide to drive progress monitoring and collect data that's being used to inform teaching and learning. If we're using that backward design and we're beginning with the end in mind, we're starting with stage 1, which is a look at the standards and the course descriptions. So what you have here in front of you is a screenshot from CPOMS. CPOMS is our state official site for everything standards and course descriptions. And whether you're a student, a parent, a teacher, a homeschooler, or an administrator, this site's for you. It's free and accessible to all, and it contains not only the standards and course descriptions, but learning resources and activities that can be used for our students and teachers to inspire learning. This particular screenshot is the MJ Comprehensive Science 3. The MJ stands for Middle Junior High School, so this would be a course offered to 8th grade students. And if you look at the screenshot, you'll see that there are 68 course standards that make up this course description. Those standards certainly cover science content, but also math, English language arts, and ELL standards that are all part of the course description. You'll also notice there's 735 state available resources that could be used to drive student mastery of those standards. Okay. I also want to point out that with those 68 standards, in a progress monitoring system, it would be difficult in a snapshot to assess students on all 68 of those standards. So on a day-by-day process, teachers are doing the standard mastery and those checkpoints at a classroom level throughout the year to make sure the students are working towards course mastery and course progression. But when it comes to district checkpoints, we assemble teams of teachers to look at a subset of standards that would help define those checkpoints or those dipsticks. And that's the next screen. So in stage 2, if we're looking to identify the acceptable evidence, then the way we communicate that with teachers, students, parents, and stakeholders is we draft a blueprint for those checkpoints. And the blueprints contain the standards, the standard descriptions, as well as an overview of the number of items that are going to be featured on the checkpoint for each of those standards that are being monitored. In addition, teachers provide ongoing quality control when they come in for question item review, which is all part of the process I'm about to explain. So another part of identifying acceptable evidence is bringing teams of teachers in that work with district personnel to identify essential standards. Essential standards provide students with knowledge and skill necessary for students to master the course and subsequent courses of study. So we've taken those 68 standards that were featured in the MJ Comprehensive Science 3, and we've whittled them down to a subset of approximately 20 to 25 standards that make up the blueprint for our checkpoints. And so those are the core science ideas that we're looking for mastery, but also that set the foundation for subsequent course mastery, say in high school. Once those essential standards have been defined, we move into developing our blueprint for checkpoints. We then also craft an item review, which means teachers come in, they look at the question items themselves, they evaluate the items for level of rigor, for text complexity, for the alignment to standards, and also for the readability of the item to students. We then develop the actual checkpoint, which is a test draft. That comes out of our various district resources, our adopted textbook materials, as well as other resources the state has made available to us. And then it moves into another phase of the process, which is the administration and then the analyzing of results. And now to provide some additional detail on those two parts of the process are Michelle and Chrissy.
Good afternoon. Next is the administer the checkpoints and the state assessments. And so, as you can see, it's a 3-step process. We begin with preparation and setup, And that takes a lot of collaboration between other departments. For example, we'll collaborate with the IT department to ensure that we are all set up for administration of the checkpoints and of the state assessments. We collaborate with the ITS, and we make sure that all of our students, along with our teachers, are uploaded into our systems, such as Performance Matters for our local assessments, along with any of the state databases. We make sure that their names and everything is provided. And then we also collaborate with the ESE, the ESOL, and curriculum and staff development to ensure that we're all on the same page in regards to accommodations and policies and procedures. We order the assessments and the checkpoints and get those delivered out to the schools. We also train the testing coordinators to make sure that they are ready and have a good understanding of the policies and procedures of how to administer the assessments, and then they go back and they train their teachers. We meet with the testing coordinators through face-to-face trainings along with webinars, and we also have our testing coordinator website that we communicate with the testing coordinators through.
So as the checkpoints and the state assessments are being given, our department is providing support to the schools. For the checkpoints, we're providing support to the elementary, middle, and high schools. For the state assessments, we're providing support not only to those schools, but to the virtual school, our special centers, and our charter schools as well. We work with other departments, such as the IT department, the Information Systems Department, or IS, Curriculum and Student Services, vendors of the platforms, as well as the state for those state assessments. And in the midst of providing all this support to our schools and working with our departments, we're also responsible for administering state assessments to our Florida virtual school students who reside within our district, to our McKay scholarship students, and to the homeschool students who opt to take these state assessments. Once the checkpoints and the state assessments conclude, we conduct data analysis to direct future instruction. We create charts and graphs to identify trends over time. This type of data will be built into the district dashboard. We analyze our checkpoints to make sure that they are statistically reliable. And we also examine a correlation between those checkpoints and the state assessments to establish meaningful cut scores. We provide support for the schools for data analysis. For example, we go to schools to train them in Performance Matters so that they can better understand the data available to them in this platform. Other departments, such as school development, then review the data, and with an emphasis on learning gains. They're also working on a methodology for tracking specific instructional standards using the standards tracker, and curriculum and staff development also works with schools regarding conducting data chats.
Thank you, Michelle and Chrissy, for providing some additional detail on the checkpoint process. As Michelle, Chrissy, Lori, and I have described so far, that this process is very much driven in a continuous improvement model. There's professional development embedded throughout, and then time permitting, there are also updates provided to the various district advisory committees, whether it's DAC or curriculum advisory. They get periodic updates on this process, where we're at in the process, as well as some of the data and details that come out of the work that's being done on a day-by-day basis. Moving into stage 3, if we're planning for learning, then we also need to have resources for learning, and that's where academic plans and supporting resources come in. Beginning in the spring of 2013, we began revamping the academic plan template across subject areas, and that's work that's continued through the 2014-15 school year and into the current school year. What I'd like to do now is take you live onto an academic plan to model some of the components as well as resources, but also considering that we have many teachers involved in these committees who are also parents. This is an opportunity to show you how to access the academic plan through the parent portal. So on our school district website, you'll notice on the left side there's a panel for Parent Portal. When I click on that, I'm brought to a new page where I can click on Academic Plans. And for this particular course of study that I captured a screenshot, it's the 8th grade science curriculum. So I'll just jump into middle school and then page down to the 8th grade course offerings. And you'll notice there is the middle junior high science 3. Across content areas, we usually have a course-specific introductory page. The screenshot that I'd captured for you today comes from Quarter 3, Unit 2, which is on the Earth and Moon. And you'll notice this is common across content areas. We have our big ideas, our standards, and our essential outcome questions, and those are all tied to Stage 1 of the UBD process, which is defining what it is we want our students to learn. You'll notice there's hyperlinks that take us to the various standards as well as to CPOMs and those learning resources. We then also list those standards, which is part of Stage 2. We have aligned learning goals, which also help to track and monitor what students are working on and working towards proficiency on with the standards. And then lastly, in terms of Stage 3, we have the various district adopted materials, supplemental materials, and then strategies for differentiation. So you notice a lot of these resources, like the one here, Tasty Moon Phases, is hyperlinked. It's embedded to launch right into a CPOMS resource, which a teacher could utilize in their lesson plan. If I go back and I've uncovered my students' thinking in science, and now I want to work on maybe some mastery of seasons, I have a resource here that's from CK12. And now there's an online module that I can work on some resources that deal with seasons. And then as I pan through the rest of the academic plan, you'll notice that all these resources are coming together to culminate in a checkpoint, which would be used to gauge mastery of standards for this particular unit of time. And when I click on this resource, it's going to go to that blueprint of standards that's used for progress monitoring and gauging where students are at in their learning. Give me a second while I jump back into the PowerPoint.
So essentially, as we've laid out, it's a very important process that we include our teachers in because they're working with students every day and best know what their students need. And so we work with them to determine those essential standards. We work with them to determine how we're going to measure progress. And from there, we work with giving them resources so that they can plan and adjust instruction so that each student can perform at his highest potential. Questions?
Your questions, comments, Mrs. Fisher.
Okay, let me see if I can. You said, I think Lee said this, you narrow down a group of standards to the essential standards, which are
correct.
like the core, and out of that, you create the checkpoints? Is that, do I have that right? Okay.
Correct.
And so the checkpoints then are, the kids go to a computer and take the test?
Not necessarily. Depending on
necessarily.
accommodations, those checkpoints could be printed out. They could be done paper and pencil on a bubble sheet, and then the bubble sheet could be scanned for a score later. We do have the accessibility to where it could be administered online through a computer-based assessment or a computer-based platform.
Okay.
We are trying to mirror as close as possible the specifications of some of our statewide assessments, but at the same time, we're also trying to tailor a program to our school and student needs that works best for their situations and settings.
Okay, so when you talked about how you isolate the essential standards, et cetera, now, who's doing that? Our district people are doing that?
Yes, ma'am, with teachers. We teach all the standards, but
Right,
we don't necessarily want to measure all the standards. So for
Right.
example, in LAF standards, language arts standards, you have 1-1, 1-2, 1-3, super important standards. You can't do 1-3 without 1-1 and 1-2, so we really pay close attention to those and make sure that those students maintain that throughout the year. So that's something that we would continually monitor.
Okay. And the teachers do the administration of the testing, of the checkpoints?
Correct.
And then, what kind of time is involved? Like, what's the length of a checkpoint?
For the language arts, we've narrowed it down. It used to be about 45 questions, and we narrowed it down to about 25 questions. So it should, with the reading, they have to read. It shouldn't take longer than about 45 minutes and they do that quarterly. And then teachers obviously would monitor that in shorter segments frequently. But it just all depends on if it's like a quarter checkpoint or say in my reading programs, those will only take about 15 or 20 minutes that they can do about every 3 weeks, and those are optional.
Okay, great. And then I just have one, thank you very much for this. I have one other question. What is the standards tracker?
The standards tracker that is featured in CASEL, is that what you're referring to?
You mentioned it, but
Well, we get reports out of Performance Matters that are tied to these checkpoints. So
Okay.
on an ongoing basis, we're looking at these interims for our sake of planning and in response to data. We look at the quarterly checkpoints to see what standard students are performing well on, which standard students are maybe not performing well on, and then we work with schools to pair resources to plug those gaps.
And it will be in CASEL as well, but in the past we've used Performance Matters to like house all of that data and build reports, and now we'll have CASEL as well.
okay. And that's the way the data is kept.
There's a report in Performance Matters called Item Analysis that we can extract and look, one event versus another event, and then that's a way we can compare standards. There's other reports, there's other tools in that platform that can be used to, in essence, track standards.
So then down at the classroom level, the teacher is able to review that and see that Johnny Smith needs reteaching or remediation or whatever.
Correct.
we
At
call it
the
now, and
classroom level, they're doing that for their own students, and
Right.
then at the school level, administrators can do it for their campus,
Okay.
and then we have the luxury of seeing that data across the district.
Thank you very much.
We're spending a lot of time teaching analysis and looking at grouping students based on who's ready to move forward and enriching and who needs to drop back and do that in a smaller setting. So we've spent a lot of time with our contacts and our coaches and doing a lot of analysis training and how to move forward with that.
And I'll just insert that we spent some time at the last workshop on the standards tracker. That was part of what Brian presented that we
Okay.
talked about.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
A lot of names to remember.
Other comments? Ms. Laverdiere?
Well, this was really good. Yesterday, when I was at Varsity Lakes, Mr. Essert and I were discussing how one of his very quiet teachers was sharing, well, this is what I do, and she had the spreadsheet that she got from, I don't know if she used Performance Matter or CASEL format, but what she did is like when you have middle school, very often that last day of class before you put all your grades in, you allow the time for students for any makeup work or whatever. Well, she's been proactive and has not necessarily required the makeup work, because what she's done is she looks at the standards and she aligns what work they need to do to master the standards they haven't gotten. And what a novel idea, instead of just having them makeup work that they maybe already know.
Correct.
Have them focus on that. And then you're able to do that, pulling in the groups and doing that flexible grouping for instruction. Our teachers are so adept with this. It's wonderful.
I don't have anything at this time. I noticed that it was a lot easier to read this PowerPoint, both the last two PowerPoints, because I don't know if you noticed.
I
but
noticed, no blue
we don't have
background.
the dark background anymore, so thank you for that, but thank you for the content
I think
as
Amity
well.
was the one who made that change.
Well, anyway, I have to say that over the last couple of workshops, I think I'm beginning to get a better understanding of the layering of processes with respect to teaching and learning, administration management, it's professional development, et cetera. So this has been a very helpful overview for me, so thank you.
Thank you.
God, it's freezing.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks very much. And Okay, board member discussion. Anybody want to start? Mr. Toiber, then, no? Ms. LaRiviere?
Well, I will just share, yesterday was a very busy day. I enjoyed going to Sunshine Elementary and helping kindergartners get to their classes. And it was amazing. I was expecting to have these hordes of parents that I had to encourage to keep going, but they were really good. They were ready to release their kindergartner on, and I think I only had one parent crying yesterday morning, and that was a good thing. And the worst thing that could happen to them happened first thing in the morning, so we knew the rest of the day was going to go great, because in the thunderstorm the night before, it cut off the power, so the air conditioning didn't turn on when it was supposed to. So we had maintenance and everybody working to get the air going, and took a little while to. The custodial staff did a great job of going through all of their steps, and then they had to turn it over to our wonderful maintenance crew to come out there and help them. But it was a very smooth day. And we kept waiting for one bus to come in, and we called. Well, the bus didn't let us know that when they went to the stops, there were no children there. So they weren't late. It's just that they didn't have any passengers to bring with them. But that's part of what happens the first day of school, with parents wanting to bring their students in. And what a wonderful staff, how welcoming and loving they were to their children. And then from there, I went to 3 Varsity Lakes Middle and got to do a wonderful visit in classrooms, and teachers didn't mind me coming in. We just popped in and visited, and we just chatted with the kids. It was great. And these kids are middle schoolers, are moving in a transition time, and they are quiet. They are not unruly. It's not scary. So those, for anybody who's ever thought teaching middle school would be scary, they were really good, and they were ready for the day. Of course, there's still that deer in the headlights look on some, but it was a good time, and a good time discussing data and other things with teachers and staff there, and then moved on from there to Lehigh Acres Middle School, and they had had a smooth day. It was exciting to hear what their plans were for incorporating Leader in Me there at the school this year. Looking at the wonderful teachers they brought in, and at both schools, how they incorporating spouses of teachers they had to bring in on board, and just really excited to see what's going on, and the enthusiasm. And the synergy. There is this, you see this piece where everyone's working together, and it's exciting. So it made me excited. So I had a good first day of school yesterday.
Wonderful. That's great. Mrs. Dozier.
Going to get to my first day of school. I had the opportunity to visit several schools yesterday. I started my day at Edison Park Elementary, where I literally went through over half the classrooms in the school. I was so amazed at all of the students, that the kindergarten students, it was like they had been there for I don't know how long. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that the teachers were doing things that, doing little activities to get them to know how they're supposed, the expected behaviors and so forth. And of course, I saw all the beautiful artwork, and I saw students that were dancing, students that were singing, and I went in several special rooms, and they were singing a song, and before I knew it, I was even singing about the nut, and then it was the way that they were using a song to, I'm a nut, and they were introducing themselves with that song. It was the cutest little thing you've ever seen. Then I went on over to Allen Park, and of course Allen Park was just doing just fine. I said, is everything going well? Have you had any problems? How's the first day been? Everything's been great. Went into several classrooms there at Allen Park as well. Saw the same types of things going on, saw lots of learning, saw the I met a new teacher there that had just come on board, saw all sorts of things that the students were already engaged in doing projects in the classroom and so forth. Then I went to Orange River, saw a totally new look for their media center. It was completely different than what I walked in. She said, "Oh, we want to show you our media center." And I walked in, and talk about different. Oh, it was so different. But the most amazing thing is I was talking to the principal. She says, "I want to give you the history of myself." She said, "I am what did she say? She said, my mother and my father and my grandmother went here, and now I'm going here." So, it's like a family tradition, and I thought, boy, wow, that's really something. And she was so enthused about being there. She said, it's just like the cycle of life has just come full circle, and it was really amazing. Then I went over to Fort Myers High School. I snuck in the room of a couple of friends of mine's children, and I played with the kids there, because one was a sophomore, one was a ninth grader, and I said, "I won't embarrass you, but I just want to tell you that you can tell your parents hello, and that I stopped by to see, the classroom today." And of course, I got a couple of phone calls from parents last night saying, "Oh, I know where you were today at so-and-so time." But it was so funny. I was there during lunch, and it was absolutely amazing to me that, it was like all the kids it wasn't like the first day of school, but instead it was like they all knew what they were supposed to do. They knew where they were supposed to go. They were going to those places, whether I was at an elementary, whether I was at a high, whether I was at whatever school, they were all, everybody was going where they were supposed to be going during the change of classes or whatever. Lastly, I went to South Fort Myers High School. I went in the JROTC room, and I was absolutely amazed at the leadership that they were doing in that classroom. And I sat in there and I visited with some of the students and, talked about they were doing a leadership component, and they were putting the onus on the student and having them accountable and responsible for their own actions and things. Then I went into an art class. I went into a life skills class, so I just kind of made the gamut. But the one thing that I noticed there was that every single classroom had their data walls up so that the students would see it, that, all the rules were up so that the students would understand and so forth. But the one thing that was the thread that was throughout every school was so welcoming. And I'm not talking about to me, I'm talking about the environment itself. Whether it be, the bulletin boards, like at one school they had a theme, and the theme was superheroes, that were all superheroes, and that was, not every teacher had dressed up like a superhero, and they were superheroes, and that every student is a superhero and has something to contribute, whether it be, learning and reading. You're a superhero at reading, and then but every school had its own theme, had its welcoming for students. It was just an awesome day, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Also, last week, I don't want to leave on a sour note, but I had the opportunity last week to speak to a teacher who has been with the district for quite some time, and I sat with him for about 2 hours listening to his angst, his anticipation of what was going to happen this year, and he was talking about some things that he said, Mrs. Dozier, I've talked to new teachers, I've talked to seasoned teachers, and he says, I want you to know, and this is, the reason I'm telling all of you this is because here we are, this was preschool week, and here I had a conversation with a teacher that was absolutely, seasoned teacher, 28 years, absolutely overwhelmed with everything that the expectations are. And I know we sit here at this table and we talk about we've got to find a way to, take things off of the teachers' plates, but I'm telling y'all, if there are teachers out there that are feeling like this now in August, by October, November, and December, they're going to be crashing. And, anything that we can do to take some of their work. And he used the term, he says, we've already got PLCs, and he says, we don't get paid for that. And we have so many extra meetings for that. He said, now this year we've got Chromebooks, and now we've got, and he said the day we were doing the training for Chromebooks, we couldn't even get on the internet because everything was crashing. Well, that immediately, how can we sit here and try to have trainings when the teachers can't even be trained because the equipment is not working? That's kind of like Pearson and their testing fiascos. We've got to be ready for these teachers when they came. I mean, the angst that person felt, I felt so sorry for that individual, and it's something that I think that we've got to look at, because if there's any way that we can take pieces off of their plate. And he said, did you know that we have a brand new grade book this year? And I went, a brand new grade book? We just got a new grade book several years ago. Well, I don't know how I missed it, but I wasn't aware that there's a new grade book. Did any of you know that there was a grade book? I see one knew it. Did the rest of you know it? This is my time, so.
It moved from Pinnacle because
Pinnacle
there's a
is
whole
supported.
step Pinnacle was no longer able to support. I can't remember the whole details, but Focus is now what they will be using for their grade book.
All right, well.
We approved that.
Okay, well, I guess that just slipped my mind. I did not remember us doing it, and I said, well, I said I wasn't aware of that, and that was one thing. That was another thing. And then they talked about the fact that teachers went from PCs to laptops, and that some teachers don't feel as comfortable working on a laptop as they do on a PC. And if, in some places, maybe teachers didn't know about the fact that they weren't going to have a laptop. Weren't going to have their PC, and they may not have pulled everything off of their computer they left at the end of the year. Anyway, it was quite disheartening, my conversation with him, and it really just, it was a big letdown for me, and I knew that. I said, well, I will certainly share our conversation with the board. I haven't gone into detail about everything, obviously, in 2 hours. I can't abbreviate that in just a few minutes, but I do have some papers that he left with me, detailing different things, and it's just something that I think if there's any way for us to look at things to be manageable for the start of school, we've got to be mindful of teachers are so overwhelmed when school starts. They've got to get their room ready. We've got to manage not putting so many extra new things on them at the beginning of the school year. I guess that's what my comment there would be. Board members, we had one-time discussion about the student representative that comes to the board, and I know now that we have a student advisory committee that was brought up at our last advisory. The students said, are we going to get to be representatives for the, at the school board meeting? And of course, I said, well, yeah, we'll talk about that. So we're now talking about that. And I would ask all of you to weigh in and see how you feel about that. Also, I had the opportunity to attend the Keighley County Beautiful meeting, which I don't know if y'all are aware, but they are now meeting here, and they meet in the overflow room, or as it is better known, Training Room D, which is that room right there behind the boardroom. And they asked me if I would please MC the calendar committee that they do every year, and I said, oh, of course, I will be glad to do that. So all of you will be getting an invitation to you always get an invitation anyway, but you will get an invitation to the Keighley County Beautiful Art Contest, where they make a calendar and our students put in artwork, and then our students get prizes and get awards that night. So it's just, all sorts of exciting things are happening, and I'm just glad to be a part of this school district. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Fisher. Well, I'm going to be very, very brief, because for the first time in many years, yesterday, I missed the first day of school. I was in transit coming back from New York, getting some jet lag. But I do know that there was so much excitement, so much enthusiasm, and so many expectations. And I did get a couple of texts One from my grandson's wife, who started teaching third grade at Franklin Park and is extremely excited, and the other from my granddaughter, who Mrs. Robury knows, who had taken her little boy, Riley, to J. Colon English for his first day of pre-K. So we're very excited in our family and happy about that. I want to just say thanks to everyone who gave us presentations today. It really helps for us to be able to hear what you're doing and to ask questions and try to understand, because it is a lot. I had a meeting with a community member this morning who represents a large group of people, and he was sharing with me some of his concern about when he comes to the board meetings, what he sees and hears. And I said, it's too bad because there's so much going on. There's such good work being done every single day. And that's really what we need to be telling about. So when we talked about the annual report and the highlights of the successes, I thought that really is what it's about, and so we need to continue to try to tell our story. We definitely need to support our teachers and staff who make all the learning possible. And thanks to Marshall Bauer and the foundation for creating and sharing successes all through the year, and I know we're going to have a good year coming up. And to our business community, who are a tremendous support and encourage us every day. And with that, I will be out and about in schools tomorrow and the next day trying to catch up. Thank you.
Okay, Steve, I'm just going to ask you, this legislative liaison spot that we've had exchanged memos about, you were going to bring it up at a briefing meeting, that next year's liaison to the FSBA Legislative Committee is now Ms. Fisher?
I'm sorry, yes. So, board members, we were talking about, when we talked about the FSBA moved, they're having their appointments earlier, and so they needed a legislative liaison, and they're looking for the legislative liaison to come to be appointed in July. We don't report ours till November, and so the original talk was, well, Steve can do the one in July. It's like, no, this is actually for the whole year. And so, and if you recall, last November when we spoke, I was the legislative liaison. Ms. Fisher was my backup. And so it would now be my recommendation that she actually come in 3 months earlier, because in November we would have Ms. Fisher do that, and then I think Ms. La Riviera said was going to be her backup, but I don't think we've discussed that. That's probably not even necessary, but we can have that discussion as well and do the legislative one now, but to let her come in early so that she can actually be there for the FSBA and actually take over, and we can do it hand in hand, for this coming up this weekend, and then we can actually make the announcement, and you take it on going forward.
Okay, well, if you're going to hold my hand and help me through the beginning of it,
Absolutely.
I'll agree.
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you.
And
I'm willing to back up.
excellent.
Good, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we want to go ahead and decide on federal,
I don't know.
FRN, federal relations? Or do we want to wait on that? Because we also have 2 positions for federal relations.
Want to wait till November?
That one probably can wait till November, don't you think?
All right,
No, I'm looking at you, because you're the pro.
it's fine. We can wait till November,
Okay.
but since we're taking care of legislation, that is legislation.
Okay, a question has come up about our next meeting, about the timing of it, because it is the first evening of Yom Kippur. You were asked if you wanted to schedule the workshop, and right now we have a workshop scheduled for 2 p.m. and a regular meeting scheduled for 6 p.m. The question is, do we want to move the workshop to 9 a.m. and the board meeting to 2 p.m.?
And what day is that?
What is that?
September?
September 8th.
September the 8th.
22nd.
22nd. Okay,
Wait a minute,
thank you.
September the
It's not the next one,
22nd?
it's the-
Okay, sorry, it's not the next
So
one.
you're talking about September 22nd?
Yep.
Okay.
We have several members of the community that come who will be starting to celebrate Yom Kippur on that evening. So I think out of respect for that, it would be great if we could back things up based on us as the board.
Okay, and I guess I'm most concerned about Mr. Toiber's schedule because, oh, that's.
I won't be here.
He won't be here.
I will still be here 2 weeks.
In La La Land.
Yes, I'll be in rehab.
Oh,
so.
yes, okay. Mrs. Dozier?
I would suggest, can we move September the 22nd, can we move all of those meetings to September the 21st, which would be the Monday before that Tuesday? And then keep the regular schedule, but just move the day.
But I know I have continuous systemic improvement on that day, the 21st. And
Oh, okay.
it's elections of officers, so I'll be committed to
Okay,
be there
okay,
the whole time.
Okay, all right. Okay. Well, that was my suggestion.
I know.
Take care of it.
Well, so
Fine with backing up.
it's okay, and you're okay with starting earlier that day and just,
Well, as long as we let everybody know ahead of time, I think that's fine. We just say that we're going to, what time are you thinking about the meeting would be? Let's see, isn't it sundown when that
It starts at 6.
starts at 6, it's sundown?
So if we did
They say
2
Sunday.
o'clock,
Clock meeting.
a 2 o'clock meeting should be
Well,
sufficient.
we have a workshop that day too.
yeah, I was just saying, doing the workshop at 9 a.m. and then start the, instead of 2, and then start the meeting at 2.
Okay,
It's okay?
that's all right.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes, that's fine
Okay,
with
so
me.
if you would bring that forward
Yes,
on the next agenda, thanks. I have a letter of thank you to Suncoast Union for some work they've done, and I think it would be nice if we started as board members, all signing letters, thanking people who support the district or support schools. So that's for you to sign. At our last workshop, we talked about having a board action planning meeting for a day and a half, and, but we did not pursue that. I've contacted FSBA about doing it on October 16 or Friday and Saturday of October 16 or 30. They do not have a facilitator for the 16th, but they do have a facilitator for the 30th. I think if we are going to have a board action planning meeting, that we need to start organizing it. I think we do want to have a facilitator. And we'll have to figure out where we're going to do it. So I'm just basically letting you know that
And the dates again
Or
are,
are you talking about a retreat? Is that what you're talking about?
we're not using that word.
Okay, well, that was one of the things that I had put on the memo for tomorrow, that would be part of the discussion
Okay.
that we would have, so,
But I'm thinking if we want to have a board action planning meeting before November, so I was thinking mid to late October. So I'm just throwing dates out.
what were the
So
dates that you were suggesting?
This October 16th. Oh, and October 30th.
Discussion for tomorrow.
I prefer 30th.
Okay. I think the 30th is better too, because that way we do have a facilitator who does know the district, and I think, okay.
Just gives me a little bit more
Yeah,
space.
Steve's suggesting that we go for the 30th.
well, that whole week, I can't do it because I've got babysitting duties, so we might want to look at our calendar somewhere besides here at the meeting. I've got,
Okay, well, that's
my
fine.
grandson is out of school that week, and I'm babysitting all week.
Okay, well, I wasn't looking to get a decision made. I was looking for you all to give me feedback
We should
on
do
what
it.
would work, but I think we need to schedule it before our reorg meeting. And, we need to make plans. So if you all would get to me with
Some dates.
some dates, that would be very helpful. I would appreciate that.
And it's one day or one and
It's
a
a day and a
half?
half.
A day and a half.
A full day followed by a half day.
Okay.
Or we could do a half day followed by a full day, but I think most people think a Friday with a Saturday is what we were thinking.
Where would we do it?
Well, we haven't had that conversation. If you'd like to make a suggestion, that would be great. Mr. Martin says we have to stay within 100 miles of Lee County.
Right.
So, right?
Yes, roughly.
Yeah, I say we go to the beach, yeah.
Anyway, so if you all would get me,
Dates.
dates and suggestions
Let's see.
about
Our reorg is the 17th.
Yeah, yeah.
So you want it sometime before our
Yeah.
reorg?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And I'm out of town the weekend of whatever's between the 16th and the 30th. I'm out of town that weekend, so.
24.
24th, yeah, so I'm trying to
The
convenience myself.
24th is when you're out of town?
Yep, I'm in Austin.
Okay.
Wedding. Coming up. So, that concludes my comments. Mr. Martin?
Have none this afternoon, thank you.
And,
None at this time.
okay. Any good of the order? I think I pretty much covered that. Okay, seeing none, this meeting is adjourned, and the next meeting will be at 6 PM this evening. Thank you very much.